luck, news from the UK, and it seems as if some chickens may be coming home to roost. A House of Commons report has been published talking about immersive technologies and potential addiction to them, and in particular there is a whole section on loot boxes, and it is frigging damning. The short story is quite simple. A committee set up on behalf of UK politicians has deemed that loot boxes should be regulated like gambling, and children should not have the ability to buy any of them. The report notes that a survey found 31% of 11 to 16-year-olds have paid money or used in-game items to open loot boxes. Looking at the report, it mirrors pretty much what I've been saying since 2016, and brings with it a whole bunch of evidence and a lot of condemnation for the game industry, much of it, practically all of it, deserved. One particular juicy element to this is how those behind the committee have criticised representatives from the game industry for a lack of honesty and transparency when attempting to defend their loot box practices. And that is coming from UK politicians. You know you've screwed up when they're calling you dishonest. As the BBC notes, the MPs found the industry was reluctant to accept responsibility for intervening when a player was overspending, or even to put a figure on how much was too much, and some had been willfully obtuse in answering questions about gameplay which MPs needed to know in order to better understand how players engaged with games. Yep, that sounds like the game industry we all know and love, doesn't it? Willfully obtuse, yep, that's part of their playbook. They use weaselly words and flimsy propaganda when they're talking to us, people who are actually observant of the game industry and know what they're up to. Of course they're gonna try and dishonestly slide shit under the noses of politicians. But they're not helping themselves. The MPs in the House of Commons really do need to know this information to have the best view of the industry they can have. Hiding it is not gonna help publishers. It just makes them look, well, unhelpful, dishonest, and obtuse. And when you're trying to defend loot boxes as good old honest fun, you do not want to look shady. But the so-called AAA game industry, the mainstream game industry, simply can't help itself. It just can't help looking like it's got something to hide. The report is called Immersive and Addictive Technologies, Digital Culture, Media and Sport. It is pretty lengthy, and there is a helpful section all entirely about loot boxes, and I'll read you a little bit from there. Much of the evidence that we received from gamers critiqued the loot box mechanics in Electronic Arts' FIFA series. In the game's Ultimate Team mode, players build their own football team by buying virtual packs containing a randomized selection of footballers. To purchase these packs, players use coins that are earned in the game and points purchased for real-world money. In 2016, EA CFO Blake Jorgensen told investors that the Ultimate Team mode accounted for roughly half of the $1.3 billion the company makes from extra digital content. That is equivalent to $650 million in annual revenue, in addition to that generated by unit sales of the full games. Electronic Arts releases a new game in the FIFA series every year. However, with each new release, players' teams are not transferred over, and therefore they must rebuild their teams by purchasing more packs to acquire the best players. One gamer told us that this cycle resulted in them spending almost £800 to £1,000 a year annually on FIFA. Another gamer told us that because a pack's contents directly affects gameplay, because some players are not as good as others, it incentivizes people to keep buying packs in the hope of getting better players and therefore performing better in the game. They told us that in order to compete, players feel like they need to buy hundreds if not thousands of pounds worth of packs in order to get the best players. Children are especially vulnerable because they lack the maturity to understand that these purchases are manipulative, and their parents may not understand that these purchases are entirely unnecessary. Moreover, because, I'm reading a lot here actually, it's a small amount compared to the overall report, but all of it's just so juicy. Moreover, because the probability of securing some footballers in a pack is less than 1%, some gamers have expressed frustration at spending vast amounts without receiving the desired reward. To tackle the issue of speculative spending on loot boxes, one player recommends that the sale of items in-game, cosmetic or otherwise, should be allowed via direct purchase or via achievements unlocked through in-game actions. Yes! In a loot box type system, the player typically has a very small chance of unlocking the item they actually want. This encourages further spending on loot boxes in order to get the item they want. Oh, and here's a good bit. This references EA's legal VP Kerry Hopkins when she tried to rebrand loot boxes as surprise mechanics. We put some of these concerns to Kerry Hopkins from Electronic Arts, who responded that the way they have implemented this mechanic in FIFA is quite ethical and quite fun. Yet this is noticeably out of step with the attitude of many of the gamers who contacted us following our evidence session, including those who vehemently rejected a characterization of packs not as loot boxes, but as surprise mechanics. One gamer called the company's testimony to us a barefaced lie, and another told us that the company has heavily marketed and referred to their systems as loot boxes for several years, and the mechanics of the system are exactly the same no matter what they choose to call it. Fucking game industry thinks it's so fucking clever, makes itself look so fucking stupid. There's this saucy bit in bold here. We recommend that loot boxes that contain the element of chance should not be sold to children playing games, and instead in-game credit should be earned through rewards won through playing the games. Oh yes. In the absence of research which proves that no harm is being done by exposing children to gambling through the purchasing of loot boxes, then we believe the precautionary principle should apply, and they are not permitted in games played by children until the evidence proves otherwise. And that's pretty much what I've been saying. If it looks like gambling, if it acts like gambling, if it stinks of gambling, it should be regulated like gambling. Loot boxes employ all the psychological manipulative tricks of gambling. They're found in games rated as suitable for ages 3 and up, and yet require more parental supervision than a higher age-rated game without loot boxes. Otherwise, there's a risk of the child emptying their parents' bank account, and that absolutely needs a warning label. It should be the burden of the game industry to prove that loot boxes are not harmful, and it's a topic they avoid talking about. Up until now, all they've ever had to go on, all they've ever used to defend themselves is technicality. The technicality that loot boxes can't be gambling because you can't cash out and get a real financial reward. And that's not good enough here. They're going to have to finally address the elephant in the room and talk about the potential harmful effects of loot boxes, and I've got lots of testimony from people who have been harmed by loot boxes. I've already shared some of it on this here channel, and I'm planning to share more because the stories are heartrending. Under the section titled Potential Harms of Loot Boxes, we have heard concerns about the structural and psychological similarities between loot boxes and gambling. Dr. Aaron Drummond and Dr. James Sawyer told us in written evidence that the random delivery of loot box rewards is akin to conventional gambling products and designed to exploit potent psychological mechanisms associated with the development and maintenance of gambling-like behaviours. Dr. Drummond and Dr. Sawyer argued that it is plausible that engaging with these loot box systems could have short-term consequences, e.g. overspending on accessing loot box systems, and longer-term consequences, e.g. facilitating migration to more conventional forms of gambling. However, academics broadly acknowledge that there is not yet enough evidence to reliably conclude that loot boxes cause problem gambling. This was echoed by the then minister's observation to us that if evidence does emerge that loot boxes can be a gateway to problem gambling, then we need to take that seriously and we need to take some action. But the evidence is not there yet. There are not many studies yet. Even if there is not enough evidence at this stage to establish a causal link between loot boxes and problem gambling, other research suggests that they may still be causing harm. Loot box mechanics are integral to major games companies' revenues, and evidence that they facilitate profiting from problem gamblers should be of serious concern to the industry. We recommend that working through the PEGI Council and all other relevant channels, the UK government advises PEGI to apply the existing gambling content labelling and corresponding age limits to games containing loot boxes that can be purchased for real-world money and do not reveal their contents before purchase. And again, I struggle to disagree. The FIFA series is rated as suitable for children aged 3 and up, and yet requires parental locks, parental supervision in order to make sure that the children do not spend obscene amounts of money trying to unlock their favourite footballer. That absolutely should carry a warning. Parents by now know to look for violent content. If they don't want their kids seeing lots of blood and guts, they know not to buy their child Doom. Arguably, loot boxes cause a lot more significant damage than the content in Doom, because the content in Doom isn't literally taking money from you. Here's some good stuff too. This talks about how right now there is that technicality that means loot boxes can't be classified as gambling because there is no financial payout. The existing legislative framework has been critiqued by Dr. Aaron Drummond and Dr. James Sawyer, who argue that real-world monetary value is too narrow a definition of value when it comes to loot boxes. It ignores the subjective value created for players from the combination of scarcity of and competitive advantage provided by in-game items in the gaming environment. These in-game rewards can have value for the players and influence players' behaviour, i.e. motivate them to engage with the loot box mechanisms without being converted into real currency. Perhaps more importantly, it ignores the fact that players are demonstrably willing to pay real money for the chance to acquire these items, implying they have a monetary value even in the absence of the ability to convert them back into currency. Fucking yes! Exactly! It is also widely acknowledged that the virtual contents of many loot boxes can be cashed out for real-world monetary value, a process known as real-world trading, which brings them closer in line with the legal definition of gambling. The games industry has taken a hard line against the practice, which is usually prohibited within a game's terms and conditions. Kerry Hopkins told us that Electronic Arts has 24/7 security staff monitoring activity to be sure that people are not engaging in this type of behaviour, and yet still bans thousands of players a year for violating its rules prohibiting people from selling in-game items outside the game. The prevalence of real-world trading suggests the industry does not have as secure a hold on it as it might argue. And Dr. Mark Griffiths told us that the Gambling Commission's position appears to be a case of the law struggling to keep pace with technology. Did Dr. Mark Griffiths get that from me? Because that is almost verbatim what I've been saying for years. I do think some of my videos and stuff were submitted to the committee for this report by fans and viewers and that, but that is exactly what I've been saying. This is one of the most validating reports I've ever read. Those are some cheeky highlights. The report is massive. It talks about other things, VR, cyberbullying, data. There's a whole ton of stuff to chew through if you're interested. I'll put a link in the description of the video. Also, I'm not sure when it's going out. It should be sometime today, but I did an interview for BBC News. Should be for the telly. Should be for the telly. How about that? Did it with Skype video and that. I ranted vaguely coherently. I dropped some solid sound bites. It was a fun little thing. It was talking about this report. I had an idea, I had a warning thanks to this interview that this report was dropping today, but I didn't know it was going to be quite this spicy. I know I did a lot of reading in this video, but it was very edifying reading, I'm sure you will agree. I'm trying in videos less to go over points that I've laboriously made again and again in my videos. I normally do that for newcomers, but I go into so much detail every single time, I realise it can get a bit dull for existing viewers, so I will just conclude by briefly reiterating the point I've been making for many years, and that is I warned the industry, I told the industry this was coming, I said if they kept pushing the limits, if they kept pushing the envelope, if they kept pushing the goodwill of their own communities, legislators would be interested and reports like this would happen. Did they listen? Did they fuck? And as we can see from how slimy and weaselly and worm-like they're being in the face of all this, the so-called AAA industry hates, loathes any shred of accountability, hates to take any responsibility for its own part in its own bullshit. Well, tough, chewy bollocks. The responsibility is here. Oh, and as I suggested before, that trailer that 2K Games put out for NBA 2K20 that showed literal gambling games like slot machines right next to loot boxes, yeah, that absolutely didn't help the industry whatsoever. One of the main reasons the BBC contacted me was about that trailer, so well done 2K Games. Looks like you were a bit too arrogant. Yeah, fuckwits.